Welcome back to the Daily Lift. Today we are in James chapter 5. And here in chapter 5 of the book of James, we see him writing about Job. And he reminds us about the perseverance of Job and the wonders of God. And he says, "Indeed, we count them blessed to endure. You have heard of the perseverance of Job and seen the end intended by the Lord, and that the Lord is very compassionate and merciful." I especially love when New Testament writers write about Old Testament books, because we have here divine commentaries on what God was meaning by these Old Testament writers. And so here, before we get into Job, though, I want to talk a little bit about James, because James is a fantastic book. If you are seeking wisdom, seeking a better mindset, seeking better faith, read James. Apply the things that James instructs us to apply, because it's all about mindset. First off, he starts off this book by saying, shift your mindset about trials, about obstacles. He says, these things give us patience. These things help us build our endurance. He says, count them all joy when we fall into these trials. And he's talking about also wisdom in this book, so much about wisdom. And he says, if we lack it, just ask, because God will give us these good gifts that we ask for. And he also talks about faith. He says we have to ask in faith without doubting. And he also says faith without works is dead. And so here in James, he's talking about Job, because much of this book is about enduring trials, enduring hardships, and persevering through these things. So we are going to need to know a little bit about Job to know what James is talking about here, and to really get the message and the lesson he's trying to give us. And so Job was an ancient book that was written before Moses wrote his books, and this is probably before Noah in his day. Before Noah, or after Noah, before Abraham. But anyways, it is a long, long time ago. And so we have here that Job is faithful to the Lord, and he is the richest man in the East. And Satan comes to accuse Job of being faithful only because he is being protected by God. And God tells him, have you considered my servant Job? And Satan's response is, well, of course he's faithful to you. You give him everything he needs. He has everything he could ever want. Why wouldn't he be faithful to you? And so God challenges Satan, and he allows him to do terrible things to Job's family, to Job's prosperity, and to Job himself, short of killing him. And through all of this, Job never forsakes God. He stays faithful, even when he doesn't understand, even when God approaches him to correct him and correct his understanding, Job stays faithful to God. And so what can we learn from all of these trials? And how can we apply these things for us today, as James is telling us to remember these things and learn from Job? Well, first off, I think we can remember and learn that bad things oftentimes can happen to good people, to righteous people. There is a common misconception back then, even in the Jewish day, but even today, that we are being punished for the bad things that we do, and that karma happens, but not always. We know that at the end of this life, at the judgment, that everything will be straightened out and that everything will be made fair and righteous. But while we're here on earth, just because bad things happen to us does not mean that we're bad people or we did anything wrong. And we can see that from Job here. But also, we learn that we need to trust in God and his promises. God tells us that he'll never leave us or forsake us. And through the trials, through these shapings and molding, as we talked about in the pottery, we see that God is closest to us when we're being put through these trials and these hardships, that he's shaping us and molding us. We need to remember that he will never forsake us. He is also a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. What do we win? What are the rewards that we get? Well, here in this life, we get peace. We are rewarded with that peace that surpasses all understanding. That it doesn't matter what happens in this life, that we can be blessed despite of our circumstance, because we have God and we have that hope of heaven, which is our final reward. And he also rewards us with wisdom while we're here on this earth. He asks us and he tells us to seek after him, seek after understanding, seek after wisdom, and he rewards us when we faithfully do these things. We also can remember and learn from Job that God will protect us. And then we need to trust in God's protections because he can see what we can't. We don't know what's around the bend. We don't know what's in the future, and we don't know why things are happening sometimes, but God does. And we can trust that he knows what's best for us and that he will give us a way of escape when these hardships and these temptations come. He also will use us sometimes in our lives, in our hardships, and our faithfulness to put the devil to shame. And this is exactly what God did with Job here. We also can learn that we endure trials and hardships by going through them, by seeking God's help, by seeking his compassion and his mercy, and we know that he's in control. And when we do this and we go through these hard things, the next time we go through something as difficult or more difficult, then it becomes easier because we are building up our endurance, we're building up our perseverance. And so I want to encourage you today to endure those trials, endure those hardships, seek after God's compassion and his mercy, know that he's in control, and as always, go lift somebody up.